speed up the introduction. This is the second one.
Sorry about technical difficulties. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, almost. My name is Chris Hebert, and I had the honor and privilege of being the group leader with these guys. We got Philip Spear, Devin Rooney, Colin Baker, Phil Blanclose, and Chris Hoback. And pretty much from the beginning of the semester, we knew that we wanted a sci-fi game. We wanted something in space. We wanted something a little more futuristic. And we knew we wanted something third person. We wanted to be able to see a lot of the models. We wanted to get to know the main character. We wanted to see what was going on. We wanted to see as much detail and texture, as much richness as we could put into the game. So that was a big part of how we started. As you can tell, for those of you that have been here in past semesters, you know that the groups were a lot bigger. So we knew we had a small group, so we knew we had to make sure the work got split up, the work got done, and that everything was always kept pretty manageable. And so what we hope to do real quick is kind of walk you through our design process, how it started from the beginning, where we went with development, and then show you a short demo of the game. So to give you a little bit of the story behind the game is going to be Philip.
Hi, I'm Philip Spear. I did much of the story work for the game. So the basic premise is that it's several hundred years in the future, humanity is advanced, and at this point we're trying to spread out beyond our main planet. Can everyone hear me okay? By the way, so you, or the main character, is someone who works for one of the global mega corporations who at this point have gone far beyond national into more than one planet. And its primary job, the corporation is the Andre Corporation, and its primary job is to go out, find other planets, new sources of material, new energies, new life forms, or new civilizations, if any are there. Whenever they find a planet, they take one of their company guys, send them out to scout, do a survey of the planet, see if you can find anything. On most cases, the planet is abandoned, so he just goes around, sends out some probes, takes soil samples, all the usual boring scientific stuff. In this case, whenever he lands on this one, he finds broken down machines, some crumpled buildings, some ancient statues, things that he generally never encounters. So in addition to his normal duties, now he's trying to figure out what happened here, what went wrong, who lived here, and exactly what became of the civilization that was on this planet before. So we nailed the story process down pretty early on in the development, which of course meant that, okay, now we have a story, we have a basic idea of what we want our game to do, and we have to start putting it together. And to do that, Chris and Flip are going to come up here and talk about the architecture.
Alright, I'm Chris Hoback, this is Philip Blanclose. When we talk about design to architecture, we want to keep some things in mind. We want it to be very simple and very organized. That way everybody had an idea. They could read each other's code and know what was going on. Another thing we were kind of worried about was the efficiency. We wanted to make sure we cleaned up particles and things like that. I don't want to be using anymore, so it wasn't dragging the game down so. As far as the plugins, we actually used very few. We used IR Connect for sound, to implement the 3D sound, and we used CE GUI for the heads-up display and the menus. Also, the game states. We have minor states and major states. The major states being like the menu, playing, and the credits. And the minor states being pause, where we just wanted to not clean everything up. We just wanted to stop updating certain things, so it would just stop the freezing. Usually we can come back to wherever it's at. Also, for the plugins, we wanted the bike to look different than the character. So we implemented a minor physics engine, so it would look more realistic, however realistic our bike would look. And talk more about the plugins as well.
Okay, we did use a particle accelerator to get the particles working. That was not a plugin, but it was another application that made it easier to do. We used IR Clang for sound. It helped us do 3D sound and 2D sound. Basically, it did all the work for us. We would tell it where we wanted a sound to play in 3D space and set the listener to the player, and it would do all the calculations for us. We also used friction acceleration, so when you would ride on the hovercraft, it would slow down instead of stopping abruptly. We used gravity for the hover bike to slowly go to the ground, for the enemies to not fly up and go out the map. And we also used CE GUI, which was a plugin to go through the interface, go switch between states and stuff, and to talk about that is Chris.
All right, so now that we had states pretty much well implemented, we decided that we needed an easy way to get around in them. So you start off, our menu screen's up there. It's got play, info, credits, quit. Each one will send you to a new state. Each of the major states will have a cleanup function that goes and makes sure that there's nothing running in the background that doesn't need to be running. Once you get going, you have a pause, and then from there, an easy way just to view the controls, what you need to press to do the different stuff. The biggest thing is going to be is actually our action state, which is the while you're playing. And we realized we wanted to keep it really simple. We wanted to make sure that, again, the reason we're doing a third person here is because we want to be able to see what's going on. So we don't want to get cluttered with a really busy HUD. So we just have two things really going for that, and it's just going to be a little health bubble in the bottom right that you'll see later, and each gun will have a unique targeting reticle, and that's it. From that point on, it's just going to be you in the landscape playing around. So once we figured out a way to aim at things, we needed something to shoot. So to talk about our enemies is going to be Colin.
So I was in charge of designing the enemies and the enemy AI and the behavior, and I realized pretty quickly on that it would be pretty messy to just have enemies just thrown into the code, so I designed an enemy manager. And the enemy manager is a list of enemy structs, and every frame it updates, it runs through the list, and it takes all the enemies and updates them, things like their collision detection, their line of sight, their attack behavior, their gravity if they need it. Some of the enemies do float, so they needed to be able to hover above the ground. And now, the enemy manager is used only for the common enemies because the boss behaves much more differently than the regular enemies, so he needed his own class. And this class also had an update function that ran right down side by side with the enemy manager, and it would update his collision detection and line of sight and everything else. And both of them have a projectile manager. The projectile manager manages the projectiles similarly to the way the enemy manager works, except it runs through the projectiles, updates them, their movements, their positions. And all of our projectiles use particle systems, so I'm going to hand it over to
For particles, instead of using actual objects as the bullets, we use particles to represent those. We did use particle accelerator to do that. Basically, we would make the particle itself in Photoshop and use particle accelerator to get the particle looking like what we want. Instead of coding, running the program, and seeing what happens whenever you do it, it's more of a user-friendly interface. Whenever you change an attribute, it shows you right away what the particle looks like. To get them in the game, sometimes, if we make a particle in the 3D space in particle accelerator, it might be way too big in the game. So going into the actual code of the particle, making minor adjustments to that, fix all that. We also use particles for dirt, for the hover bike itself, and for a few other things we use particles. The bullets themselves, we didn't do collision with the particles themselves. We attached them to invisible objects, and we use the collision with the objects to see if they were hidden enemies. And talk about collision is the